Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Shea Away Book Club, where we are reading books that are connected to and are of interest to us in throughout the Shea Away. Seems like it's been a couple months, but we've been focused on Hazrat Inayat Khan's The Mysticism of Sound and Music, and today's container will be reading Chapter 9, The Divinity of Indian Music. Oh, and I also want to say that if you would like to join these read aloud containers, they happen each Wednesday at 2:30 p.m. Louisiana time. So I would love to see you guys join. And I'd also like to open it up if anyone wants to start the reading off today.
I can start. Chapter 9, The Divinity of Indian Music. In India, life begins with the soul. Therefore, science, art, philosophy, mysticism, all were directed to one and the same goal. Not only arts and sciences, but even professions and commerce were not without a religious view. One can imagine how, in a country where even business and profession had a spiritual view, the musician's life was full of religious thought. No part of the world, east or west, can deny the divinity of music. In the first place, music is the language of the soul, and for two people of different nations or races to unite, there is no better source than music. For music not only unites man to man, but man to God. Now the question comes, when is it that music unites man with God, and how? Belief in God has two aspects. One belief in God is that a person thinks, perhaps there is a God, or, as others believe, I believe too. He does not know God by reason, nor does he see God before him. God for him is perhaps in heaven. Whether he exists or does not exist, he does not know. From one who has this kind of belief, a little confusion or disappointment or injustice takes away his belief in God, and it is for this reason that thousands and thousands of men who worship God give up their belief in God. Does anyone else want to go?
Yes.
I'll go for it, Tiff.
Okay. There is another aspect of belief, and that belief is the realization of God's presence, not only in the heavens but in one's own surroundings. When a person arrives at this point, his belief becomes a living entity. To him, God is not only a judge or a sustainer. To him, he is a friend who hears the cry of his soul in the solitude and knows the best and greatest secret he has in his heart. A friend upon whom he can always rely in good and bad experiences, and even in the hereafter. For a musician, music is the best way to unite with God. A musician with a belief in God but brings to God the beauty and the perfume and the color of his soul. From from the metaphysical point of view, there is nothing that can touch the formless except that art of music, which in itself is formless. There is another point of view that the innermost being of man is the akasha, which means capacity. Therefore, all that is directed from the external world can reach this realm, and music can reach it still more. A third point of view is that the creation has come from vibrations, which the Hindus have called nada. In the Bible, we find it as the word which was first. On this point, all the different religions unite. It is therefore that man loves music more than anything else. Music is his nature. It has come from vibrations, and he himself is vibration. there are two aspects of life. The first is that man is tuned by his surroundings, and the second is that man can tune himself in spite of his surroundings. This latter is the work of the mystic. The Sufis in the East work for years together to tune themselves. By the help of music, they tune themselves to the spheres where they wish to be. The yogis do the same. Therefore, the beginning of music in India was at the time of Shiva, lord of the yogis. This great yogi teacher taught to the world the science of breath. Among the Sufis, there was a great saint, uh, Monuddin Chisti of Ajmer. At his grave, music is played, and Hindus and Muslims go there on pilgrimage. This shows that the religion of the knowers of truth is the religion of God, and the prayer of the greatest devotee rises from his heart in the realm of music. All different methods of bringing about calm and peace can be attained through the help of music. Period.
Thank y'all for reading. Um, yeah, I just want to hold a little bit of space, and I'm curious to know if there is any part of this chapter that you guys feel particularly magnetized by, and if so, why? Hmm. I guess what I find interesting so far about this chapter is the fourth paragraph, where this kind of conversation happening, or this idea being posited about God or the divine um having more faces to its essence than just being a judge or a sustainer, but that the divine is a friend. And I don't know, that kind of made my heart palpitate a little bit, in the sense that, yeah, and the line that says that he, God, the divine, is a friend who hears the cry of one's soul in in the solitude, and knows the best and greatest secret that one has in their heart. Um, Honestly, I feel like a lot of it, part of that, reminds me of a little bit of like my childhood, and how like the seed of like interest for um learning or figuring out, let's say, who God is, was kind of like planted early on in my life, but how like that seed gestated for quite longer than I expected it to. I don't think I had expectations of it as a child, but um just like how that interest kind of followed me into college, how I was like um really close to becoming like a religious studies minor, because I feel like the pursuit, or like the journey that one goes on, or that I went on to answer that question, like who is God, um really is probably something that I'm going to be figuring out my whole life. And something about the fact that the divine is a friend, as opposed to just having this transactional relationship with the divine, is doing something to me right now. It's really powerful.
Yeah, that that passage definitely. I didn't really know exactly how. I don't feel like I know how to talk about why it's resonant for me. Um, I mean, I guess like what's kind of coming through for me is that it's so easy to be in disharmony with other beings. And I feel like in some ways, like, yeah, like God, God is like, I wouldn't say like everything outside of disharmony is like naturally harmonious, but I feel like when I am able to touch into harmony, even if things around me are disharmonious, it feels like it's because I'm connected to the divine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I really like that you kind of situated it in your response in a place of like find touching the places where you within you that are harmonious in moments that where like the external world or other things may be disharmonious. That also really like resounds for me because I'm like, yeah, like I feel similar, like the divine is in those moments. And like a lot of people say that, like, God is here, like God is with us, or like, is this X in the room with us now? Like whatever that might be. And I think it speaks to like the um, the presence of the divine and how like it's kind of, I'll say, everywhere, maybe.
Yeah, I love that you said that as well because it's like I won't say that like all interactions with the non-divine are necessarily like disharmonious, right? Like I think it's very possible to experience harmonious interactions with other beings, but then they feel divine, you know. And I think that's kind of interesting. Like something I'm thinking about or tumbling over in my mind is like, what causes disharmony? Um, if it's not divinity, then is like there's something that is not God, right?
Mm.
Or something that is not divine, which is not part of, or maybe is part of, like God, which sort of obstructs that harmony, like pervading more interaction, let's say.
Mm. I feel like that's a very like, yeah, I've wondered similar too, where I'm like, if there is something obstructing like harmony, is that the thing that needs to be like removed or distilled out of the mix in this like interplay of energies as well?
Yeah, I guess like the way I'm often guided to feel into it is just like, and I think we've talked about this a lot, but it's like, yeah, like, God is a body that we're inside of. And those bodies that we're inside of can also become sick, right? Or like disconnected, just like our bodies can. Um, and then, I think like a question might be like, okay, so like, where did that sickness come from? And then
Mm.
I would be like, well, it probably came from like somewhere else in the body that God is part of.
It's funny because I was having a conversation with my dad about this yesterday, not about God, but like him asking why, I guess to the air, like why he didn't feel good for that moment. And I like started asking him a number of questions about like what did he eat, how did he sleep, and he's like, why are you making it? He didn't necessarily say it, but his attitude kind of like got defensive. He's like, I didn't do anything to myself. And I'm like, no, I'm not saying that you did anything to yourself, but I'm like, there's like time in between when you, let's say, take a step on your left side of the body and make that frontward movement to make that left step for the rest of your body to either catch up or for, I don't know, let's say like, I don't know, just I was kind of like acknowledging the lag in between the moment where he felt a little sick and the moment that he may have done something to like either like create inflammation in his body or like sleep in a way that, I don't know, contorted his muscular structure and made him sore. So that's why I'm like mostly laughing. I'm like, wait, I feel like I was just having this conversation yesterday in a different context. But yeah, it's very, very plausible. Just as like, yeah, with humans, like if I stub my toe, I'm not saying it's my fault, but I also may have been wearing the wrong shoes for a situation to create that opening for my toe to get stubbed. Um, or scratched up or whatever. So yeah, that aligns.
I guess like for me, like kind of what comes through that way of looking at things also is just like responsibility for like how we conceive of God or how we conceive of like the music we're all making together, right?
Mm.
Um, and I think yeah, like what I'm hearing is sort of like what you said about relationships with the divine not being transactional, and also yeah, calling back to what this passage says about the divine being a friend, because you know, like I would say like we have pretty shitty friendships if like we're always the ones who are like, you know, dumping trauma or like venting to a friend and like there's no kind of reciprocation. And like I guess in that way I kind of feel as if like exemplifying or like burnishing or maintaining divinity is something that yeah, like we all kind of have responsibility for.
Mm. This idea that, how did you say, maintaining or sustaining divinity is something we're responsible for? Is that?
Whoa. Whoa. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I hope everything's all right.
On this keyboard. Yeah, yeah, like maintaining, sustaining, and like burnishing. What the hell? I'm so sorry.
I wonder if one of the cats is walking on the keyboard, if that's what you said.
No, like the cat was walking on the keyboard, and then it wasn't, and it still did the thing. I'm very spooked out.
That's so strange. Oh shit. That's so weird. We were just talking about like time delays and lags too. But I know also you were making a point about divinity, which I'm gonna hold space for that. But this is, the broom is a spiritual container, y'all. So I'm gonna say it now that I'm gonna make some offerings to Novu's field. And those are metaphysical offerings because Yeah, I feel like the Sharia way is also not a stranger to, I won't say interference, but energetic flux. So yeah, I want to hold space for that too.
Yeah, I guess yeah, without like trying to explain the way I see like my cosmovision too much, I guess like I just think about my own body and I think about all the cells in my body and how like they need stuff from me in order to function well, and I need them to function well in order to keep giving them what they need to function well. And I guess like that way of viewing things just feels like way more accordant with like how my understanding of like nature works. And I think it kind of fits into like how I tend to relate to the divine as well. And yeah, I think like not being like in a position of like feeling like a savior or anything like that, but acknowledging responsibility feels like it is a characteristic of people who I feel consistently manage to manifest the divine in their interactions with other people.
Mhm.
And I would say that not taking responsibility is a characteristic that I find is like very common amongst people who tend to have interactions which are disharmonious or trend towards being disharmonious as well.
Dang, that really aligns for me. Wow. I'm sorry, I'm just also sitting with that, like, just that dichotomy that you brought in of yeah, wow, Imma just let that marinate for a second. Mm. Mm. No, it says, "I don't know why I'm feeling this move to ground divinity interpersonal triviata." I hope I'm saying that right. Triviata.
I don't know if it's really a word. I was just saying like triviata, like just like just like interaction. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I just feel like this move to understand that like divinity is not just something that people who call themselves spiritual engage in,
Mhm.
or something that like somebody who's studied at the seminary or something is an authority on, but it's just something that like shows up. I think like this book does a really good job of talking about how music pervades like life, and yeah, it feels like very much in that vein for me, just understanding that like everything is spiritual, so like everything we're doing is spiritual and it affects other people's spirits. And then like maybe like if people can see that, then they can start to see some of the other stuff where it's like, oh yeah, like spiritual affects can be non-local. you
Mm.
know like maybe if someone didn't even hear what you said with like a bad spirit in quotes, their spirit can be affected in like violent ways.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, Tiff says, "I think it's supposed to show up in how you interact with people, it being the divine." Lexi put the to life emoji in the chat, which is a sacred flower of life with some light language. Then Base Monster Tip says, and maybe people can do more of that. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because I'm like, often I feel similar, especially when I'm having conversations with other woo and non-woo people in the broom, when I'm searching for like a medium to ground um an aspect of the divine through and into, it's usually relationships and interpersonal structures. um because I do think relationships are prevalent the same way sound is, like that we're um like from an ecocentric perspective, like at its most basic level, like our first relationship is the one that we have with the earth and like the material reality that we're in. And so, and then the the number of connections that we have after that, after we incarnate and we're born, just multiplies from there. And so for me, it definitely feels like interpersonal mediums are also very like transferable, the same way that same way that Hazrat Inayat Khan is proposing that music is and sound is as well. That came up for me in dojo too. Nobu says it was thinking about this in dojo, like, damn, we have been talking mostly about things like relationships for a while and politics and shit. And now we're talking about insect consciousnesses. Yeah. Insect consciousness. And I think that that's like, for me, like right now, it's coming through is like how people talk about the divine, like the quantum bros, like the quantum physics bros. I love them. I'm just like naming them by calling them out. Um, they speak of reality being in fractals or existing in fractals, and I'm like, what's a more direct fractal than like our relationships and then how we interact there being overlaid, or maybe not even overlaid, like um, microscopically seen through our relationship with sound, and then how can we see that through our relationship with our own bodies, and then so it does kind of check out across a couple of different contexts, and I think that that's what number one makes sound and relationships so universal. But I think um, divinity becoming more universal and people um, becoming more interested in that. I can absolutely see that happening. I see it already, but yeah. Tiff says maybe sound itself is a relationship between the waves and the medium it's passing through. Ooh. Can you say more on that, Tiff? Maybe sound itself is a ooh.
Yeah. I think that the sound, like sound is like the only way you can really hear sound is if it's passing through a medium. Like they say in space, you can't hear too much going on because there's nothing for it to bounce against. It's like a vacuum. But like on Earth here, we got air. So like my vocal cords are vibrating waves through my vocal cords, and that's sending sound through the air that I'm also breathing out as I talk, and that's wiggling the microphone thingy on my device, and then sending signals out, wiggling your speakers, which wiggle the air, which wiggle your eardrums, and like that's all waves just passing through different stuff to be reinterpreted in your mind. And your mind is a brain, and it's got waves. So like, you know, you have to have something to resonate with, essentially. So like that's like, I guess that's kind of what Big Yachts be talking about. And I think every chapter he mentions something about like harmonious relationships, and like I guess I always think of harmony as like, notes and chords that sound right, but I guess like that relationship of even those notes being like the right notes being in relationship with each other, like within the medium of whatever key is it is, like it's all about a wave and a particle. And so I'm like, maybe at the top of it all, or wherever you locate your most important thing or whatever, maybe like the divine is the wave, and like literally anything else is the particle that it can wave through or whatever. And so that's the relationships, all of it, sound and stuff.
Dang, Tiff. Yeah, that really aligns for me. And I love what you said too, like towards the end about like how sound is the relationship. And I kind of just saw sound as like an affect of the divine, but it sounds like what you're saying is like divinity is inherently and throughout different contexts relational. And like maybe, yeah, like that there are going to be different mediums and different different waveforms, but that relational interaction is what creates a window, almost, is what I'm kind of getting from that, for the divine to even, I'll say, manifest for this example. Dang. Wow. It also makes me think of how some schools of cosmology um speak to like like humans and humanity and like us here on earth, this like material realm, being um dang, I'm like losing the transmission because I'm like, I feel like it's being transmitted to me right now. But oh, how that we co-create the divine. um then like some people talk about it through myth and like and bring that up and how like we co-create myth. And so it's also like this part of the text and what we're talking about makes me think of that, on co-creating the divine. Mm, sound is spirit. Yeah, I'd be happy to hear how you see it, Tiff, if you want to unmute. Mm, mm,
All right, so Nobu said it makes me feel like sound is the spirit, and the relationship between the particles is what constitutes it. And that's not exactly what I was saying, but I do agree, like that is one of the things. And I guess maybe maybe I forgot to think about that, like sound is definitely like the way without the particles to move it, because like, they say like if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it, did it make a sound? And like that, when you look, both sides can be arguing like valid points, and one side is definitely saying that like sound is sound whether somebody hears it or not. And like that's definitely like maybe the spirit, and or yeah, like the divine. Like I think at least in the Abrahamic religions, there's like the idea that like God is by himself, like he didn't need to make anything, like he was he could still be God without having created all the majestic everything. And then like, yeah, so I think that's not what I was saying, but that is a very good point.
Thank you for explaining, Tiff. I'm also just like, yeah, I'm glad that you clarified. What do you guys make of the passage, the third paragraph, where Hazrat Inayat Khan states or writes, now the question comes, when is it that music unites man with God, and how? Belief in God has two aspects. One, belief in God is that a person thinks perhaps there is a God, or as others believe, I believe too. He does not know God by reason, nor does he see God before him. God for him is perhaps in heaven. Whether he exists or does not exist, he does not know. From one who has this kind of belief, a little confusion or disappointment or injustice takes away his belief in God, and it is for this reason that thousands and thousands of men or women who worship God gave up their belief in God. And I wonder what what that evokes for y'all.
I mean, for me, it just makes me think about like how, yeah, like people may only experience divinity like conceptually. Like even what he says about knowing God by reason, I would say like relates to a knowing which comes from like playing with concepts or like arranging concepts in a certain way. But like I feel like really grateful that like that's not how I experience the divine, right? Like, um, but I can see what he's saying. Like if it's if like an understanding of God is based upon an arrangement of concepts, and some of those concepts are contingent upon like certain things happening and certain things not happening, or like, you know, what he refers to as justice and injustice, then I can imagine that like that sense of God might just like get destroyed if some of those conceptual underpinnings cannot be observed to be true. Hmm.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to me too. And also like, well, I'll save what I have to say after. I'll wait on that. But yeah, that aligns for me. It's like this conceptual like warring or interacting with divinity doesn't, because like what I'm kind of picking up on is like the ripe environments to manifest divinity. If divinity is this like inherently relational thing, then it seems like having a conceptual framework of God isn't necessarily the thing that manifests God or divinity in this example. And yeah, I guess I'm just kind of trying to situate myself in that right now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, because I was kind of thinking about how concepts about God can sort of obstruct divine interactions in which like divinity can sort of emerge, or like God can emerge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or you could even say like concepts about what interactions should look like can often obstruct harmonious interactions from occurring, and therefore obstruct God from occurring in interactions, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It makes me think of the example that Tiff gave, like with the ears and the waves passing through the ears, and also all the other mediums. I'm like, what if those highways of reach were like clogged? Like, I mean, I'm gonna knock on wood, but what if I got like water in the part of my phone that like like transfer those waves or transfers to kind of like use this example? I'm like, I would be fucked. Well, maybe not like fucked, but like I definitely wouldn't receive the sound, and like it wouldn't pass through me, and I wouldn't be able to share in the experience of God, which would kind of suck in this example. So yeah, I'm curious what that evokes for others. or like what's even in this paragraph for y'all, if anything?
I'm just kind of like marveling at what feels like a perception shift for me. It's like I feel like I knew on some like conceptual basis that all of our interactions and all of our bodies and all that kind of stuff and all of the interactions between the parts of our body are like part of God.
Mm.
But I feel like the presence with which I'm able to perceive how our interactions are a part of the fabric of divinity feels like new and very tactile right now.
Ashe. It does for me too. And the crows are going crazy where I am. So they really do. They really, really do. They're everywhere I am.
I think for me, this paragraph, it just made me reflect on like the I don't know, like the process of belief, and like I feel like everybody kind of like has to kind of go through both phases for like a bit, like
Mm.
because I feel like when I was a little kid, I was gullible because like so far leading up to that point where I was like I feel like I was in church from a baby the whole time. My parents was church going people. So they believed in God, so I believed in God because like I believed everything else they told me. They said if you touch the stove, it is hot. Don't touch the stove, you'll burn yourself. So I touched the stove and I burnt myself. So obviously that was true. So like, what else? Oh yeah, this medicine will make you feel better, but I mean like it's nasty. But if you take it, it'll make you feel better. Then I took it, now I feel better. Wow, fancy that. So they're like, okay, now we're going to this place. God is real, and He's a great guy, and all these great things happen. And oh, you see that bad thing happening over there? That's just to remind you that you're blessed. So God is still real, and it's like, okay, cool, sounds good. And like, then I get older and I start thinking for myself and I'm like, but why? Why? And so you start, and that's like that kind of like how Noble was saying, like sometimes like concepts about God prevent you from getting closer. Like I feel like that curiosity would have like with the right nourishment drawn me closer sooner. But it gets met with like, don't be asking no questions, like all that. So, yeah, that's something I think about, and then like later on, you kind of experience for yourself divinity, like, or like you wonder, like, is this thing I'm feeling, is this God? And then you explore, if you like don't get the curiosity stomped out of you, you might have uh a way to find your way, and get closer and to the divinity on your own. And like that experience of finding it yourself is like that kind of makes it special. That's like a unique relationship, I guess. And so yeah, I think both sides are pertinent, and I think he kind of like did. I don't know. Maybe I'm just making an assumption here, but I feel like he made it seem like one is better than the other, and like some people just know it better, but it definitely both sides have a part to experience, and like you can kind of I don't know, just you can just kind of grow through it if you stay curious. That's all.
Yeah, Tiff. No, thank you for saying that because I'm like, it feels like inherently connected in some kind of way, like the way that like we grew up or like how we were taught to like believe or worship, and then like you said, like whether or not curiosity is a bridge towards like a secondary step, maybe that like, okay, like let me take this curiosity to a next level, or like let me figure out for myself, maybe even. And I feel like it's so like that's kind of to me what makes people curious about the woo and like divinity and like magic and all that kind of stuff, is because like there's still like some sort of like hunger, to me. And I'm like, that's how I felt growing up too, where I'm like, I was told to worship a certain way, told um told to perceive like worship and like how the divine works for other people in a certain way, that it did kind of get to a point where that why became bigger than what I was just told. And no fault to like my people at all, or like my conditioning. I'm like, it's conditioning. It keeps you alive. You know what I'm saying? Like, I love what you said, Tiff, about like touching your hand on the stove, figuring out it was hot, and being like, them people was right. They was not lying about that. And so you assume that that is the same level of integrity or truth that's going to be brought into every situation. And if it isn't, that desire does not go unnoticed. I would even say by the divine. And it's also probably even a little bit divine that that curiosity continues forward, or continues one search forward to figure out what's beyond. Like, okay, this is just what I was given, like if you're given the ingredients to something. This is an example that came up earlier in the broom. Like if you're given like food and it's like raw, it's raw food, it's not finished yet. You gotta go in the kitchen and be a chef a little bit, and sprinkle a little season into like your taste level, and like get it right, so that like the hunger that you have, which is the why, or like your curiosity or search for the divine, can still be satiated, even if it's not cooked up by another person's hands, is kind of like what I'm taking away from what you said too. So I'm really grateful you said that. Interesting. Lexi, is it okay if I read what you said in the chat? Yeah, of course, Tiff. Thank you for planting those seeds. I'm like, okay, okay, I see where you're bringing us. I'm coming along. I'm coming with you. Um, so Lexi says, for me, growing up, the quote bad thing happening over there is because people are being punished for something, LOL, or is a test, I guess. Also, excuse me. Also, have heard that like people need a big challenge by Allah, the divine, once every 40 days to be considered on the right path or something. Ooh, interesting. Or at least once. Lots of number 40 egregores in Islam lineages, maybe, perhaps. Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because I'm like, I feel like there is a kind of like maybe like a place where those two places divide, like, or like a what's the word I'm looking for? Fuck, what's the word? A dam that breaks up those two waters, of like the waters of your conditioning, and then like the waters for uh what you want to walk into. Oh, there's, yes, 40 days. Okay, so Nova says 40 days in the desert, question mark, LOL. 40 days of rain for Noah is what Tiff says. 40 is big for the Abrahamic faiths, it sounds like. Like, I'm not even being sarcastic. I'm like, oh, 40, shit.
I feel like there was something that you said about curiosity, about divinity being part of divine itself, which felt really meta. But I think, yeah, like for me, putting it together with what Tiff had said about like sound and relationship between particles, like the wave that happens, like almost like without the particles, or primordial to the particles. Um, and like what we were saying about interactions between humans being part of the divine kind of had me thinking about how that curiosity kind of manifests, or could manifest, in like different perspectives of like what divinity are, which sort of like evolve the selfhood of like God itself, if that makes sense. Like in the same way that I feel like, you know, like when we like meditate and like we bring awareness to all the different parts of our body and sort of like, you know, I think like holding that awareness allow for those parts of our body to communicate in different ways. We often like get up like off the mat or like out of bed or whatever, and like we feel like we've evolved, right? And I can kind of almost imagine like God doing the same thing. And like, yeah, like God in like yoga nidra or like shavasana. And then that's like causing us to feel like contemplative, or you know, it's causing like quantum bros um to conclude that, you know, like the universe is made out of awareness of God or something like that.
Thank you for bringing us to that, Nabu. Because I feel like that's what I was kind of trying to get to, or maybe alluding to, when I was saying how like there's this co-creative aspect with when it comes to the divine. That's like part of our individual experience of excuse me, um, of the divine itself. Um, and so I'm just kind of holding space for that transmission to let it ripple.
I can say for me, I think about the co-creation and like that idea of like being on a path to like get closer to the divine, or it's like you have to walk that path yourself, and whatever walking that path means for you could be different from anyone else. So it's like that's something unique to what your experience is. And yeah, it's and so like I think like your idea of the divine will be that way. And I feel like that's kind of like how religions come about, like when a certain group of people follow a similar path, like that's going to be unique to them, and it might be a culture or a bloodline or whatever of different, certain types of people doing the same similar path, and like comparing notes, and then like passing them notes out so more people can follow that path. And that kind of, that's the upside and downside of religion. Like it's just that path, they make it seem like that's the best one sometimes. And but yeah, it's still got to be co-created even within those confines of like, if you like we were saying about that paragraph we were talking about, um like the person who just follows along because that's what everybody else is doing. Like
Yeah.
you might stumble upon the divine while you're on that path, and that's cool, but you might not. And that might like hinder your curiosity to go find your own path.
Mm. A shame. I was snapping while you was talking. I was like, yes. I have really long nails on, so I was like clacking them, like, yes, go off, Tiff, go off. Because I do feel like it has to be co-created. Like even if you're part of a certain bloodline, or you're part of a certain lineage, or you're part of a certain spiritual house, or a certain teacher, or like you create a way, like that means now like you have kind of taken on the robes, so to speak, to be a caretaker of that way, and also like caretaker of I'll say maybe some Abrahamic religions probably need a new PR team, but that's beyond me. That's beyond my pay grade. But I'm just kidding. You can pay me for it. But I do like what you said about that, like how it's still an active relationship with the divine is kind of what I'm taking away. So I'm glad you really said that because I don't know, I feel like something just clicked for me as you were saying that. Yeah. Nobu says, I feel like God is in the room right now. Actually, I agree. And Nobu says, I heard Qumran, Tiff. I wonder if you know what Qumran is or Qumranis. Um, Lexi says, I want to teach my Islamic ancestors that one's practice can be chef's kiss, that one doesn't have to fear the age of 40 or, quote, running out of time. Ashe, Ashe. Oh, thank you for contextualizing, Nobu. I was definitely going to stumble through that. So thank you. Ah, so the Essenes are, according to Nobu, the Qumran is what the Essenes called the land that they were in. In fact, the Essenes is what the Greeks called the Qumrani. I have like so much reverence for that lineage. Nobu says, but yeah, what you said about getting together and finding a way is when I heard that. Am I understanding that correctly? Or where I heard that? Hold on. Tiff says, sprints back from Google out of breath. Also, the name of the cave where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. Ashe. is and is. Wow. There's so much I want to say. Um, but I welcome y'all to come off mute if you'd like. I'm gonna become a JW and have copious numbers of interactions to co-create a better God. What's a JW?
I was being sarcastic, like a Jehovah's Witness. You know how like they're always like standing out near a train station,
Yeah,
speaking like 19 different languages to different purpose.
those are everywhere in the neighborhood. They come
I'm
around like,
co-creating God.
if you don't get the fuck off my porch. Tiff says, please don't. Yeah, they need better outfits, I think. Jehovah's Witnesses. Um, it's safe to say that their uniform has served them thus far. But I do feel like there's something to this co-creating God. The fashions do not be giving per, okay? Anti-per. I mean, reverse per. I knew you were gonna do it, Tim. I knew. But yeah, co-creating God. I feel like that is kind of like where I mean, when I tune into that, I assume when people say that they have a spiritual practice, that that's what they're doing. Oftentimes it's not, but that's not my job to tell them that. But I do think that there is, even I feel like in this text, Hazrat Inayat Khan is pointing to this co-creative aspect to it, that there has to be some sort of like ripeness of environments, ripeness of material, ripeness of resonators, ripeness of refinement that has to kind of go into it. And I won't say that that's like a mental thing. I don't think that that's a mental process. I do think that that's a somatic and energetic and divine process. Um, but I do think I'm really grateful. I know I'm really grateful for the fact that it's coming into the room. Go to snort at 3:33 p.m. Ashe. It's angel snorting. I like that. I'm gonna borrow that. Now that's a divine sound purr. Okay. How do y'all feel about stopping here and kind of saving the rest? Um, Maybe like just unpacking chapter 8 and chapter 9 with more clarity this Saturday at 11 a.m. Louisiana time in the Broom radio, the pot radio. Um, y'all should pull up. Yeah, that feels good. Okay, great. Awesome. I'm gonna relieve Craig. Talk to you later, Craig.